Hello and welcome back to Timeline Talk here on All for United. We've got a episode today specialising on the Cavani and Ronaldo dynamic up front, whether they can play together, who should be starting on Saturday, the positives and the negatives of both, and we'll just try and make an informed discussion on that. So I hope you enjoy. We've got a brilliant panel of guests, and I'll introduce them straight after this.
Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United.
Here we have it, as promised, a quality lineup of guests, I think it's fair to say. Boys, I hope you're well. We'll get straight into it. I'll come to you first, Charlie. You're the tactics man here. Ronaldo or Cavani against Everton, because it's been noted on Twitter at the minute that obviously there's a lot of love for Cavani at the minute, especially given his work rate against Villarreal. And there's some people saying maybe he deserves to start over Ronaldo. Maybe people have noticed that performance levels have dropped a little bit as a whole team since Ronaldo came in. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on, by the way. I think that I said it last season, Cavani's my favourite player, and I said that last season, he still is. I think he brings something that other people don't in our team. I think we lack a bit of defensive awareness at the front end of the pitch with our attacking players, and I think he's one of the only ones that sort of has that. I think Dan James had it, but obviously he didn't have that quality required to start, really, whereas I think Cavani does. And Ronaldo, of course, brings goals. He brings a lot to the team. But Ronaldo's weakest point is obviously, I think a stat came out today about his pressing. And I understand people, say it doesn't matter, etc., etc. But it does. It's a huge problem for our team, because if we don't press to win the ball back, we're basically just sitting back. And we've done it quite a lot this season. We did it against Villarreal when Villarreal had the ball for large periods of the game. When they had the ball, we just sat off and allowed them space. Now, that's not a problem as long as your defensive shape is solid. But the issue is that isn't solid either. So we're sort of not really doing anything. We're sort of not really pressing, and we're not really sitting in a very, very solid shape. Now, obviously, with Ronaldo, he's this sort of luxury player, and I understand we don't want Ronaldo, although he hasn't lost his legs, we know that Ronaldo is still 36 years old, and we don't want Ronaldo running around the pitch like a headless chicken, wasting his energy pressing people. I understand that. But to win a title, to win trophies, you've got to do things as a team, as a unit. And even before Ronaldo came in, we weren't a pressing unit. So with Ronaldo in now, we've lost another player that we had in Cavani with the pressing. So we need to do more without him. We've got to sort of factor in Ronaldo's never going to do it, so we need that sort of extra element. In terms of on the ball, I think obviously they're both quality players. I think Cavani offers a lot more off the ball, but I think on the ball, obviously Ronaldo does offer extra quality. But I think Cavani definitely deserves to start. I would give Ronaldo. I'd put Ronaldo on the bench for this game. I know that's a bit of a bold move, but I don't think they can both start. I understand that Ronaldo can play on the left, but I think that would be an issue, especially if Telles plays. He needs a little bit of protection defensively, so I'm not sure that would be the best move. So yeah, I'd start Cavani and drop Ronaldo. I think Cavani's shown he deserves to start, and Cavani's again not here to be this bench player. He's been sat on the bench for quite a while, so I'd like to see Cavani get a start.
Fair enough. I think we all would. I think before I move on, I'll come to you on this, Charlie. Just a quick answer, because we covered it quite extensively yesterday. So if you still want the answer in detail, go and check out yesterday's tactical review. But we've got a question saying, is the 4-4-2 possible? I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on it.
The issue is that we don't have natural wingers. So we've got obviously Martial, who's lacking a lot of confidence and he's in a bit of a bad state at the moment. So we had obviously Dan James, who's a natural winger, but we don't really have natural wide players. We have more inside forwards. So I'm not sure a 4-4-2 would really work for us. if you look at the players we've been using, obviously Pogba on the left at times. Sancho is more natural, but Rashford, Greenwood are not natural wingers. So I don't think that would be great. I think Ronaldo and Cavani could work, but I would use them. Excuse me. I would use them in the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes in a game, like we did against Villarreal, because Cavani's pressing element can come in. That is what Cavani can do. If you're an advocate of Cavani coming off from the bench as a super sub, that is a very good quality of his. He will press and he will harry defenders and make them make mistakes, as we saw. So I think that 4-4-2 for me is only possible as a sort of an in-game switch rather than a thing to start with.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a general consensus we had yesterday as well. But yeah, we'll move on. Wes, it's good to have you on again, mate. Always brilliant to be on with you. We'll go back to the Cavani Ronaldo thing, because Charlie mentioned pretty extensively pressing and the difference between the two. We saw that stat today from, I think it was The Athletic that posted it, that Ronaldo has the least pressures out of any striker or something. And the thing I noticed about it was, I think Greenwood was in the bottom 10 as well. So do you think it's important that we have a player like Cavani up top with those two to maintain the high press that we want?
Yeah, I think obviously, state the obvious, the attack is the best form of defence, really. It starts from the very front, right the way throughout. In terms of Edinson Cavani, I think that for me personally, given what he showed when he came on against Villarreal, against tired legs, he's a defender's worst nightmare. As soon as he came on, I think he ran about, 50, 60 yards to take a ball off, I think it was Pau Torres, keep a ball in play that, Ronaldo didn't chase for. But yeah, I think, we need to be careful how we manage Eddie. Obviously, he's just come back from an injury. He's missed a lot of games. I think for me personally, he's a player that I would always be looking to bring in for the last, 20, 30 minutes of a game up against tired legs. In terms of Ronaldo playing with Cavani, it probably is possible, but obviously, as we just mentioned then, if we were looking at doing it in a 4-4-2, those two would probably work together, but we haven't got natural, wide men, so that would be a massive problem. So I wouldn't look at playing them together, but I would look at, playing them one come off, one come on, latter stages of the game, and I think, we probably see the best out of both them. As Charlie said, Ronaldo's 36, even though he's got a body of a 25-year-old, and Cavani 34 as well, picking up injuries. We just got to be able to carefully manage the two and make sure they don't pick up any injuries which could impact on the rest of the season. But, fair play to Cavani. As on with Charlie, he's my favourite Manchester United player. I make that very loud and clear, I've always been a massive admirer of him, and I still think he's got a lot to offer. I wish we could keep him for a lot longer than to the end of the season. But for me personally, I would go with Ronaldo tomorrow purely on the basis is that, the guy's our top goal scorer. He's absolutely deadly. He still frightens defenders to death. And then we've also got that option of Eddie Cavani as well to come on if we are in trouble at any stage during the game.
Fair enough. I completely agree with your point about him. He really is a fan's favourite, isn't he? For a number of reasons, but it's brilliant to have him at the club. I'll come to you, Henry, next then. A few murmurings on Twitter. I wanted to get your opinion on this. Obviously, you were at Old Trafford and saw his goal, and it's impossible not to be in love with Cristiano Ronaldo right now. But people have noticed as a team performance, other than the Newcastle game, maybe we've sort of struggled to, grind out wins and stuff like that. Is there a chance that by bringing Cristiano Ronaldo in and bringing him the focal point, the team as a whole is suffering?
I think suffering's a bit extreme. But I think that your style of play changes. It's going to change when you got Ronaldo in the side. There's not going to be as much running up front. Cavani, we know, is kind of heavily reliant on stamina. He has been his whole career. So him running for 70, 80 minutes is a given. He's going to do it. Whereas Ronaldo looks to, conserve a little bit more. Obviously, he used to be a winger, and I think the comparison between him even 5 or 6 years ago and him now is null. No one should even make that comparison. The team isn't suffering because we're scoring goals, and he's scoring us goals, and he's winning us games. He's winning us games that we would have drawn last year, and that's one key point with this side this year. That Villarreal game we would have drawn last year, almost guaranteed we would have drawn, because you've got Ronaldo up front, you've got belief that in the last, it was almost 30, 40 seconds to go in the game, and he scores. And it's the belief that he can do that is well within the side. The togetherness is better than it's been in a long time. So I think people are focusing on that one stat the Athletic put out. I think people are focusing on that a little bit too much, and they're keeping to try and point out his deficiencies in his game. But the fact of the matter is he's our best player in terms of goal scoring, leadership, and he will be he's essential to this team. Don't get me wrong, Cavani, I love him to bits. Desire and passion is something that you want from a United player, and that's why Martial pisses me off so much, because he saunters around the pitch. If he gave 100% every game, wouldn't have a problem with it. But he sulks when he doesn't have the ball instead of chasing the ball down. And everyone says, "Oh, what is the United way?" Oh, yeah, United way is just a saying, whatever. Desire and passion should be in every single player in every team. I mean, regardless of what you're being paid, but you're being paid a lot of money, and Cavani is, again, he's that guy that you need in the last 15 minutes of the game, and he, without him in the Villarreal game, we wouldn't have won that. I'm in no doubt. We wouldn't have pressed. We wouldn't have won the ball back. The performance itself was, I won't go as far as say it was dreadful, but it was poor. It really was. The first half, people were getting a bit aggy in the ground, and I was thinking, and then when Villarreal scored, you got people going a bit nuts, getting a bit annoyed, but those sort of things do happen. But we've got an abundance of talent. We've got to use it. I personally would start Cavani at the weekend. I know people will disagree, and that's absolutely fine. We've got an international break coming up, and Fernando Santos has a habit of using Ronaldo in games that he doesn't need to be used in. I think they've got a friendly coming up against Qatar or something, and I wouldn't be surprised if he played. I don't want him to, but he's that old that you've got to protect him. So I think rotating might be an option, and then you've got the luxury in the last half an hour of the game if you're struggling a little bit, or even at half time if you're struggling to bring him on and change it. But I think Cavani gives you more pressing, and getting an early goal was essential midweek, and it's probably even more essential at the weekend because we can't afford to slip up in the lead. James,
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. Hear me now? Yeah, I had a bit of technical issue there.
Yeah.
All right, sound. I'll come to you on this, Charlie, as well, because I'll ask you a similar sort of question to Henry, because it is interesting. You'll know better than anyone that performances of late haven't been probably where they should be. Now, it feels to me like it's a front line right now that's lacking a bit of cohesion, more than usual anyway. Do you think that is due to Ronaldo's arrival, or do you think it's a weird coincidence?
Well, I've been saying for a long time, really. I don't think we generally play our performance level, even sort of last season as well. Our general performance level isn't great, and I know winning is the most important thing. Of course, it is. But I said after the few games that we've had this season, eventually those average bad performances will catch up with you. We're going into a run of fixtures soon where we're going to be playing some very, very good teams, some very, very good systems. And in these sorts of games, if you don't match the opposition, you'll get punished. We played Villarreal on Wednesday, and we all know that we could have conceded easily 3 or 4 goals on the night. And we also know we played Wolves, and we could have easily conceded 3 or 4 goals. And of course, it's ifs and maybes, and I know I'm saying that, but if you give those chances to Lukaku, Kane, blah, 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 when we play those better sides, they will probably take those chances. So I think the general performance level before Ronaldo came was not great, but I think bringing Ronaldo in, there was always a risk that we were sort of always trying to suit Ronaldo. Ronaldo is going to get us goals, there's no doubt about it. He's obviously a key player for us, but we've just got to make sure that we're doing the best for the team. I think last season, Henry probably knows my thoughts on this about Bruno and Rashford as well. I think that Bruno and Rashford were two very key players for us last season. But sometimes they were scoring goals, but we weren't playing well as a team. And just because we won the game or we came back, everybody, of course, we all celebrated. We ran around the room, we drank beer, we celebrated like headless chickens. We're fantastic. We won the game. But actually, we didn't play that well. And we thought, so, oh, God, how have we won that 3-1? How have we won that 4-1? How have we won? And that's a fantastic attribute to have. If you want to win a title, you need to play well for about 20 games, 22, 23 games. And you need to grind out probably 10 or 12 results at some point in the season. But the issue that we have, I think we do it a bit too often. And I think bringing Ronaldo in, that gives us that extra bit of individual brilliance that we might counter on or we might just take advantage of. And it's fantastic if it works, and it is working for us in certain moments. But I think when we play those big sides, we're going to have to play better as a unit on and off the ball, because, when we're playing those top teams, we cannot, when Bruno Fernandes gets the ball, he cannot just keep looking for that ball in behind, taking that risk. We need to keep a bit of possession. I think people realise, I think a lot of people recently have been an advocate of Matic. And I've been saying it for months about Matic being underused. And I think a lot of people are realising now how important Matic is for us and how much of a key player he could be. And I think the main reason for it is his use of the ball. I think in midfield, I think McTominay is improving at it. I think Fred is shocking at it. But the use of the ball and the intelligence in midfield is something we lack. And I think particularly when we play those sort of top sides, those forward players are going to get one or two chances. And if we can just control the game a little bit better in midfield, I know it's difficult without this sort of top-class CDM, but if we can control that game a little bit better in midfield, use the ball better, not always look to take that risk so early. We just need to keep the ball a little bit, try and pin the opposition in their defensive third, and then we can go and then attack teams. So I just think that we just got to be careful. I think that I think often we do attack a little bit full throttle, and it's fantastic when it works. But I think against low blocks, I think patience is the key. So I think tomorrow probably will be a low block. So it'll be interesting to see how we go.
I think, Charlie, I think you're right in the sense that we need Matic, but I think we need Matic of 3 or 4 years ago, and that's the problem we've got now. He doesn't have the stamina and the pace to keep up with. I mean, when you're playing against low block, the likelihood is they're going to counterattack you. So I think the issue is we don't have that player. If you moulded Fred, Matic, and McTominay together as one player, you'd probably have a good enough player to play in that role, or even maybe just McTominay and Matic. But I mean, McTominay looks a little bit shaky midweek. He wasn't quite covering the ground. I mean, we played the right kind of formation, I think, in the sense that we needed to go for the game. But Matic he worries me a little bit in the sense that he hasn't got the legs that he used to. And I think playing him week in, week out, same as playing Ronaldo week in, week out, there's a risk that it could run out of steam. And but we don't have the luxury in midfield of, you can just stick Fred there and it'll do as well. Whereas with the striker, we've got the luxury of knowing that Cavani will do as well as Ronaldo and probably run more. But I think we've got a real problem in that position. Matic is a great player, don't get me wrong, great on the ball. But off the ball, he does get caught a little bit and looks positionally, he hasn't got the legs to get into the areas to stop counterattacks. And I think that's a little bit of a worry for us in that run of games. I trust us against the bigger sides more than I do against the smaller sides, and that is a little bit worrying. But
I agree with what you said. I just think that more people are realising that Matic isn't fully finished. He can still play a role. I think before the season started, at the end of last season, I think a lot of people, I thought Matic should have played the Europa League final, for example, because Villarreal were not interested in attacking in that game. They were not interested in attacking. I thought we're going to have most of the ball. So I know McTominay had a really good game, actually, but I didn't understand why we didn't keep Pogba on the left when he'd been so good there and put Matic in midfield. But I just think Matic, I'm not saying he should play every game, but he can play one game a week, and he can play against certain opponents. And I think tomorrow would be the perfect opportunity for him to play. I think against West Ham, he came on and got the assist for Lingard's goal. I think against Young Boys, Matic came on and made a difference. I think the game against Villarreal, Matic came on. I think every single, other than the Southampton game where everybody was poor, Matic has done very, very well this year. I think he's been one of our best players. And people think, oh, well, why has he? But people need to actually realise on and off the ball. On the ball, his progressive passing is very, very good. Off the ball, yes, he does get ram pass. But if you actually look, so does Pogba, so does Fred. You know, that's a general weakness that we have, sort of stopping dribblers coming past us. But I'll hopefully be at Old Trafford tomorrow, and I've watched Matic a lot before. He's better at all of our other defensive midfield players or midfield players at sort of his positional play. So if there's a player looking to make a pass, he'll just move that half a yard or a couple of yards over the pitch to intercept it. And I think our other midfielders struggle with that. And I think obviously
it's something. Look, Fred will surely start tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just something that people don't see. You know, if you're watching on the TV, I watch all the away games on the TV. If you're watching on the TV, you can't see. If it only follows the ball, obviously you can't see players off the ball. But I'll watch it tomorrow if Matic does play. I will see, and I'll probably try and find a couple of clips of it. The way that he works off the ball. Yes, he gets ram pass, but sort of when the opposition is looking to make a pass, his movement just to intercept or tackle the ball. But I'm not saying Matic is this world-class player. I just think he's our best option, particularly for tomorrow.
Best out of a bad situation.
Fair enough. Well, you've almost brought me nicely onto a discussion about midfielders, but I just wanted to finish off on the Ronaldo Cavani situation. I'll come to you, Wes. Do you think, just as a final point, do you think it's important this season that Solskjaer doesn't treat Ronaldo like the player he is? Is it important that we get the balance right where we don't bow down to what will help Ronaldo the most and stuff like that? Because obviously a player of his caliber demands a certain level of respect and input into things. But how important is it that we sort of treat him as an equal to everybody else?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important, really, because obviously, as you mentioned, with the balance throughout the team. But I don't think Ollie's that kind of person to sort of treat anyone any differently. Obviously, probably Ronaldo will have arguably some probably more demanding needs than others, but there's no better man manager, in my opinion, for man management in the league than Ollie. Obviously, we know tactically, we know his flaws, we know that he's still learning and he can get better. But as a man manager, in terms of being able to treat any player the correct way, I think Ollie's hit the nail on the head with it, really. But yeah, I don't think we'll fall into that trap, and I think Cristiano's been quite humble about it as well, in my own opinion. I think he's obviously shown that level of respect towards the team, and he's been quite outspoken about it, and obviously highlighted that he does want to help the team as much as possible. So I don't see this kind of prima donna attitude with Ronaldo. I think he genuinely wants what's best for the team, and he respects Ollie. And he said that, I think it was in one of his interviews maybe a week or so ago. He said that, yeah, they're good friends, but at the end of the day, he's my boss and I'll listen to him. And that's all we want to hear, really. If the manager's got something to say, Cristiano will listen. Certainly.
Well, let's hope it stays that way, I suppose. Well, we'll move on to midfielders, because an issue that's also been raised on social media, I actually saw a news article about it today, is related to the sort of the downward slope that Pogba's form's gone on. Obviously, he got 7 assists in his first 3 games, and he's not recorded one since. I think for his standards, he was also pretty poor against Villarreal. So just first to kick us off, Charlie, what do you think the reason is for that? Because I don't think he's performing at the level he can do in any way.
I think there's quite a few players like that. I think David De Gea, I think everybody would agree, him and Ronaldo toss a coin for who's been our best player. I think De Gea has been our best player so far this season. I think on the ball he's improved massively as well. I think that's gone under the radar, actually. De Gea, sort of his kicking's improved a lot. But I think it would be a bit unfair just to talk about Pogba. I think without Pogba, we may not have beaten Leeds. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but I think the assist that Pogba got against Leeds, I'm not sure if that was another player, they would have been able to do that. His pass for Bruno's goal, his pass for Greenwood's goal, I'm not sure we have another player who could have done that. And then we went to play Southampton, and Pogba got that assist for Greenwood where he just flicked it to him. Again, would a player have had that tight control? Maybe not. So I think without Pogba, we might have been sitting on maybe instead of 4 points after 2 games, we might have only had 3, might have only had 2. And then I think Pogba obviously had a poor game against Wolves, average game. And then obviously again against Newcastle, he was fantastic. His form has dipped slightly in terms of his assists, of course. But I think the issue with Pogba, I think a lot of people are waiting to see when Rashford comes back in, what's going to happen. Because we know that McTominay and Fred, they have to play in Ollie's system when Rashford comes back in certain games. They have to play. So then what do you do with Pogba? Rashford won't be dropped because Ollie likes Rashford a lot, and Rashford won't be dropped. So can you drop a world-class player in Paul Pogba? If you want to drop him, you can drop him, but he's probably going to leave. If you don't drop him, then you're going to have to play him on the left. So then you have to move Rashford to the right. Then you have to drop Greenwood or Sanchez. So you see what I'm getting at? It's very, very difficult. In terms of why his performances have dropped a bit, I think our general team performance has dropped. I don't think it's fair just to point that on Pogba. I think Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire have both started the season reasonably poorly. I think particularly Maguire, actually. And I think there's quite a few players at the moment. Obviously, they're both injured. I think there's quite a few players that are not having their best season. But I think Pogba, without Pogba, we may not be sitting on 13 points after 6 games at all. I think we could be sitting on about 10 without Paul Pogba. So I think it'd be very, very unfair to sort of say that he's been having poor games. I think it's been more of a team performance issue rather than him. Obviously, that Pogba's maybe worse performances than he did in his first 2 games factor into that worst team performance. But also, I think we've got to realise, if you're being moved from central midfield to on the left quite frequently, that's not great. You know, you want, as a footballer, you want to have stability. And every week, you know, Pogba's been playing with Fred, he's been playing with Matic, then he plays with McTominay in midfield, then he plays on the left. And it's not great. You know, how are we supposed to find any consistency when, and I know rotation is important, but how is Pogba supposed to find consistency when every week he's playing next to a different midfielder? You know, how is he supposed to form those combinations? So I don't know what the other lads think, but I think Pogba's been one of our best players this season. I think it'd be a bit unfair to really put any criticism on him. His general performance recently hasn't been as good, but I still think he's been very good for us.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. It's not been great as a team. Started off and then the whole team's gone sort of downwards. But Henry, I'll bring you into the conversation then. Obviously, Charlie mentioned when Rashford returns, we're expecting him back just after the international break. What happens to Pogba then? Because I think it's hard to see him. You know, as stupid as this sounds, it's hard to see him start over McFred in midfield because of Ollie's sort of unwavering loyalty to them. So you know what happens.
Well, I've got 2 little quick points to make. Number one is, I love how people have turned quickly on Pogba after like 2 average performances. We're not going to mention Diogo Dalot getting rinsed, turned inside out like 10 times by Danjuma in midweek. Everyone seems to be focusing on Pogba. Dalot was the worst player on the pitch by a mile. He absolutely got sent for a hot dog every time he got attacked. It was embarrassing to look at. So I think the LUHG clan that have all fully turned on Wan-Bissaka and saying Dalot needs to play, he played, and you know, if Danjuma was good at finishing, we'd have lost that game. So I think that people need to focus on different players rather than the go-to. Let's pick on Pogba again when he has a couple of average performances. He's the go-to for everyone, and it's just so draining. And then in terms of what Charlie said, it's 100% correct. I said to you, James, earlier in the year, my first priority in the summer would have been to get a defensive midfielder that can play alongside Paul Pogba, and we didn't. So it's as simple as that. You know, you've got talent out there. You've got the likes of Bissouma out there who are being touted for a move to Arsenal. Why wouldn't we snap him up for 30 million or 35 million, which is what Brighton were asking for? That seems like a bargain to me. And he plays in the midfield with Adam Lallana as well. He plays in the midfield with someone who has no legs, so he has to do all the running. And he makes Brighton look fantastic week in, week out. So I think it was baffling we didn't go for that position, and we're starting to regret it a little bit already. And we're only in the first month of the season, which is it's not a great look. Let's be honest. In terms of Pogba, when Rashford comes back, it's a dilemma. It's a real problem. It is. You drop him and he's gone. I think simple as that. I think you drop him and put Rashford in on the left hand side and he's done. I think he'll go on a free next year, but you just can't leave that kind of talent out of the side, especially when you're up against the low block. You just cannot leave that kind of talent. And people were saying his performance against Villarreal was poor. It really wasn't that bad, actually. I know he got bypassed a couple of times, but him and Bruno, the pressing was actually quite good from both of them. And when you've got one base player in that midfield, one sitting defensive midfielder, which McTominay was, then you've got to have the two in front pressing, and they were. And I know Villarreal counter-attacked, but they counter-attacked down the wings. So what's Pogba supposed to do? Turn into a bloody left-back all of a sudden? Tellez and Dalot were really susceptible in that game. And Tellez obviously got a goal. It was a fantastic goal. But defensively, he still looked a bit shaky. So I think if Shaw and Wan-Bissaka were playing in that game, I think Pogba's performance would have been elevated. Just because he wouldn't have had to do the tracking down the left-hand side. Sancho was good, but again, him and Greenwood, they don't track back that much. They don't track back as much as Rashford would when he's playing at his best. So there were little components, and I'm not trying to just purely make excuses for Pogba, but I just think it really wasn't that bad. I think people have been so melodramatic. We won the game. I know he got hooked. We won the game, but there were so many different factors that played a part in that performance. It's not just the fact that he couldn't get on the ball, or he wasn't doing this, or he wasn't doing that. He actually played okay. He really did. And again, people will just turn on him again, as they always do. He is the scapegoat for this team. They won't turn on anyone else. So, yeah, it's frustrating to see it again. It really is. I don't think we should drop him. I really wouldn't. I'd make Rashford, go for his place. Go hammer and tongs for his place, rather than just putting him back in that side and dropping Pogba. So, yeah, we've got a bit of an issue to deal with, but it's a good problem to have, is it not? It's a fantastic. You've got Rashford and Pogba, and I know McTominay's not the best, but you've got him vying for a place, as Matic, and you've got so many of these players. Martial can't even get a kick. He probably won't be in the squad when Rashford gets back. We've got a really good problem to have. We've just got to figure out a way to put them all in the system.
Yeah, fair enough. Just before we move on, Henry, thoughts on being called the discount Steve Harrison?
I think I mean, I've got a window open, and it's big enough for me to jump out of. So make of that what you will.
I just hope that rests on Brown Knight's conscience forever, that if he says anything else, Emery's a goner. Just to round off the Pogba debate then, Wes, I'll come to you. Where do you think his best position is? Obviously, Charlie said he's being switched from a centre midfielder to a left winger sort of very fluidly all the time, and it can't be. It's got to be a bit disorientating for him. So if you were to put him somewhere, where would it be?
Midfield, all day. I think you've got to get that level of balance right, and as the boys said, in the summer we should have made an additional signing in midfield too. We should have looked at someone who could probably, we use the terminology, unlock Pogba, but it is right. We need someone who can bring the best out of Pogba. I'm not saying hold his hand, but someone who will, like you see Pogba for France, right? Plays with Kante, you see probably the best midfield player in the world. You do. On his day, Paul Pogba, in my opinion, is the best midfield player in the world. Passes the ball extremely well, can score a goal or two when, at times. But for me, he's got to be in that midfield all day. He's already shown he's got 7 assists this season. People are quick to forget that. I think that it's a good, like Henry said, it's a good headache to have with Rashford coming back. But Pogba, for me, he's got to stay in that midfield for us. That's where I think he's best suited for the team. But yeah, if I was going to play him in midfield, it would probably have to be with the likes of Matic and not with Fred.
Fair enough. Well, we'll quickly stall while Charlie goes and does something. But Henry, I'll ask you the same question. I've been
Wrong one, pal. Wrong one. Oh,
what are you
God. Don't worry.
Oh no, never mind.
Oh, James, you're on mute again.
Where do you think that Pogba's best position is? Because I've been impressed with him off the left, but he's obviously naturally a centre midfielder. So kill some airtime while we lose Henry. Where does he play best for you,
Charlie?
I thought that last season, without Pogba on the left, I don't think we would have got to the Europa League final. And that might seem like, what are you going on about? What are you going on? How do you know? I'm just going to explain. So, when we beat AC Milan 1-0 away, I think it was around the 16. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Pogba was on the bench that game and he came on. And I think he came on to play, and he scored his goal from the left wing position, didn't he? Because he was in the box. He's on that sort of left-hand side, and he just squeezed it into the near post. And without that Pogba goal, we don't know what would have happened. We needed to score, didn't we? Because we drew 1-1 in the first leg, and AC Milan had the away goal. So, if Pogba didn't score that, what would have happened? We don't know. And then we played Roma in the semi-final. And in the first leg, obviously, we won 6-2. Now, I think Pogba gave away a penalty in that game, a handball, which was a ridiculous decision, I think it was. I don't think that was a handball from memory. But we were 2-1 down at half-time. And in the second half, we blitzed them. It was Pogba, Cavani and Bruno who basically had the game of their lives. And we won back and won 6-2. And without Pogba on that left in that game, I don't think we would have won, certainly by that margin. I just think when Pogba does play on that left-hand side... by the way, Brown Knight, Ahmad was in the first leg. Ahmad scored in the first leg against AC Milan with a header. I'm on about the second leg. So without Pogba on that left, Bruno and Cavani, that combination play wouldn't have happened. And I like Marcus Rashford, but Rashford hardly had a kick in that game from the right. Because Rashford doesn't really play that sort of combination play, that build-up play, that link-up play. That's not his biggest strength. His biggest strength is running into space in behind. He can do that in terms of build-up play, but I think Pogba with the ball at his feet is better. And I just think without Pogba in that game, in that second leg, we would have really, really struggled to win by that margin. And then we all know the second leg against Roma, my goodness, for a few minutes, I was actually thinking we might get knocked out that game. So those 6 goals that we scored were actually very, very handy in the end. It should have been a bit better. But I think Pogba on the left, there's been some games where he's played really well. For example, that game. There's been some games where he hasn't. But the issue is, in midfield, we cannot have one midfield pivot for the whole season. We have to have 2 different combinations. So when we're playing opponents where we're going to have more of the ball, we're expected to produce against a low block, it needs to be Matic and Pogba or Matic and Van der Beek. When we're playing against opponents where we're going to have less of the ball, where we need to break up more possession, it's going to have to be McTominay and Fred. So the thing with Pogba is, when we play those sort of big teams, do we put him on the left or do we want more of a counter-attacking threat in Rashford? So it's going to be interesting. I'm not really bothered where he plays. I think you have to talk about the opponent you're playing against before we sort of pin in a position for him. I just want him to be on the pitch. That's my main sort of thing. I don't really mind where Pogba plays as long as it's not on the right. He needs to be in the pivot, even at 10. If Bruno's injured, Pogba can play in the 10 position or on the left. So he can play either of those roles, really.
Certainly. I'm sharing the opinion of you. As long as he's on the pitch, I don't really care where he plays. But we'll move on. We've spoken about attackers, midfielders, and now we'll move on to the defence, because a few eyebrows. There's a lot of plaudits for one of the fullbacks midweek, and a lot of sort of underwhelming feeling towards the other. So I will come to you first, Henry. There's reports today that Luke Shaw's trained, and he's got an outside chance to start. So given that Telles is obviously going to be brimming with confidence, scored his first goal, and we know from his days at Porto that he is a fantastic fullback. Do you think even if Luke Shaw is fit, it is worth playing Telles and seeing if he can build a bit of momentum? Because I've not been impressed by Luke Shaw massively this season so far.
Well, I think him being included in Gary Southgate's in his England squad, I think that says it all. He's got to be fit, surely. You wouldn't put a player in that's a bit iffy. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough decision. Telles, in terms of form, he'll be booming. So I'd play him probably. Sure, there's always a risk. I mean, I would have just said to Southgate, just don't put him in the squad. You're playing fucking Albania and Hungary. Who cares? Or whoever it is, I don't know. Who cares? We're going to win both games anyway. So why is he putting him in the squad when he's just come back from injury? He's a stupid man sometimes. So I'd play Telles personally. I mean, Wan-Bissaka he's available. I would assume he hasn't got any booking problems or anything. I don't think so. I mean, it's a given that he's going to start. I'd even start Lindelof over Delo in this game if he had a choice. He was wow. I mean, Wes goes to I'm pretty sure every game or most games. He might agree in the sense that was one of the worst defensive performances from an individual I've seen ever. It was atrocious. The guy was spinning so much. It was like being on the bloody merry-go-round at a theme park. He was getting spun left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
And Dan Juma got man of the match, and it kind of said it all. That he was turning him inside out, and it looked. I mean, part of me was thinking, "Oh my god, what is going on here?" And the other part of me thinking was, the LUHG guys are going to be delighted, aren't they? They've been calling him to be in the team for the whole season and last season as well. Oh, why'd you loan him out? Oh. I think we might have seen a little bit of why he got loaned out last year in that one game. He was awful. So Wan-Bissaka at all costs. Wan-Bissaka with one leg would have done better than that. So yeah, him or even Lindelof. And Delo didn't even do that much going forward. Really,
no.
He was a bit hesitant. He kind of kept cutting back and playing it back in field, which is not what he's there for. So, and his confidence will be shot to bits after that. Honestly, absolutely shot to bits. So, I don't think it's even a question. If you can get Wan-Bissaka back in that side, you do it.
Fair enough. I'll come to you, Wes. We'll talk about both fullbacks in the same question here. I'll ask you a similar thing to Henry. Obviously, we know the quality that Telles has. We saw it at Porto, and I think he's too good to just settle for backup left back at Manchester United. So, one, is it worth giving him a bit of a prolonged period in the team that he's not really had before to see what he's really about? And two, has that cemented in your mind Delo's place as backup right back?
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons why personally I would play Telles would be heavily influenced on, the possible selection for Everton. They're going to be without Richarlison, no Calvert-Lewin as well. So I think it's a good game maybe to keep Telles in. He does look a bit vulnerable at times, in our own final third, 1v1. But ultimately, he's been very professional. He hasn't moaned. He hasn't sulked. He's probably played as many games as Donny van der Beek, in all fairness. But I thought he'd done okay against Villarreal. People are running away with the idea that, it was a disastrous performance. Okay, the first half wasn't great. But Villarreal, they're a very compact and difficult team to play against. And I think, given the game, if you hadn't watched the game and you saw the result, you probably wouldn't have been surprised by the scoreline. But Telles, for me, I would would play him against Everton. Obviously, I'm with the boys as well. I don't think Luke Shaw has been, outstanding this season. I think that he set the standard last season. He set the bar. I think he's dipped a little bit. So maybe giving Telles a run in the team, possibly against Everton, which I hope. And then maybe if he plays well against Everton, to play him against Leicester after the international break as well. So, he could have a good run of games. He's probably one of these players. I say probably. I think he's one of these players that will get better, win more games with a sustained run in the team, and you'll probably see the best out of him. And there's no doubt that he's a fantastic left back. Going forward, he's brilliant. You saw his finish against Villarreal. People were crying out, the Porto Telles. That's exactly what they witnessed in Portugal, probably in near enough every week, because this guy scored 15, 20 goals a season. Do you know what I mean? So, but Telles for me, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. He starts again tomorrow, and I would give Luke Shaw not just that added rest to recover from an injury, but I think given the goal, I think Telles probably deserves a start, and it's the game that I think is probably wise to keep him in. Having said that, they've got injuries as well, so I think we can safeguard that a little bit. I think it'll be a bit difficult tomorrow, but I think we'll have all the ball, and I don't think we'll be in too much trouble in our own, in our own half. So it's probably a good game to have Telles, really, if we're going to be whipping crosses in the box, but like Ronaldo and Cavani. So I hope I haven't just given that the kiss of death.
Yeah, I think it's also important to make sure that Shaw doesn't think he's undroppable as well, because obviously last season he was, and that's going to inflate your ego as well. But I wanted to just ask you a follow-up question on that, Wes, because you said, Dalot probably got a bit of unfair stick, and we were talking to Abdul on the tactical preview, and he was saying the reason he played so poorly was because he was often left isolated and left with a 2v1. Do you think he's maybe getting unfairly criticised because some of those mistakes weren't necessarily his fault?
I'm going to be brutally honest. No, I think every time Dalot has been given an opportunity, not just against Villarreal, he's fluffed it. I think that the performance against Villarreal they were one of the worst I've seen from a fullback at Old Trafford. I don't think he's good enough for Man United. I think that we need to offload him. There's always noise around the Kieran Trippier, transfer. I think he would be fantastic to bring in. And I wouldn't even say as a backup, because, Kieran Trippier is the kind of player that will probably come to Manchester United and want to be first choice right back. But there's plenty of different right backs out there, that are available. But for me, even as a backup right back, Diego Dalot, not for me, unfortunately. I'd wish the kid all the best, and, wherever he went, I'm sure that, he'd probably develop and learn. But this is Manchester United. We can't have performances like that at right back. It wasn't acceptable and it wasn't good enough. So people running away with the idea of, 2v1 incidents and stuff. This is hitting standard. He dipped way below that. And I don't think you can expect or rely on players to hold your hand. You're a right back, you're a defender, you've got to do your job. Wan-Bissaka, does his job week in, week out. Even though sometimes he does get himself into trouble, he's very good at getting out of it. But, Villarreal made Dalot look like he'd just come off at, Eastlands FC. Do you know what I mean? It was poor. Very, very poor.
Fair enough. Well, just to round us off then, Charlie, I'll open the floor to you. Telles and Dalot, give us your thoughts.
They're both wing backs, really. If Ollie came into the office tomorrow morning and said, "Oh, we're going to play 5 at the back next week. What's your team? Who are you going to start at wing back?" I'd say, "Oh, wow, Telles and Dalot." They're both more suited to wing back roles, I think. I think Dalot would be more sort of reliant on a wing back. I think Telles can still play a full back role. I think Telles is better defensively than Dalot, but I still think Telles has defensive problems. I'm not saying Shaw and Wan-Bissaka don't, because they also do. I think Wan-Bissaka is very good one-on-one, but I think his positioning is often a bit poor, and I think Shaw position as well. Obviously, when he's bombing forward, of course he's going to leave spaces. But I think we do often struggle on that left-hand side due to, I think, Maguire just get exposed a little bit. But yeah, Telles is, as Wes said, Telles, when he was playing in the Portuguese league, his stats are incredible. Like he used to take set pieces, goals, assists, very, very good. And I'd like to see Telles again, actually. I don't think there's any point rushing Shaw back, as Wes said as well. no Richarlison or Calvert-Lewin. They've got no real outlets. They might start Salomon Rondon up front, which, you know, a Rafa Benitez favourite, and it might come back to bite me. But I cannot see Salomon Rondon causing us too many problems. And if it's not Salomon Rondon,
Fantastic player.
if it's not Salomon Rondon, it might be Damari Gray as a false nine. That might be more of an issue for us. But obviously, if Damari Gray is a false nine, that takes away their threat on the wing. So it all depends on how Rafa's going to set up. I know they've got Andros Townsend, and people might think, oh, it's Andros Townsend, but Andros Townsend's been playing really, really well this season. And so he is a threat. So it all depends on sort of what Ollie thinks Benitez will do and what Benitez eventually does. But I'd like to see Tellez again tomorrow. I'd quite like to see Tellez. I don't think there's any rush for Luke Shaw. We all know Luke Shaw last season was mainly injury-free for a lot of the season. But we also remember that Luke Shaw is a player that is very, very injury-prone and has been in the past. And I don't think rushing Luke Shaw back from an injury would be the most wise thing to do. I think Wan-Bissaka definitely to start tomorrow. I think Dalot is a wing back or could even be a winger in the future. I just don't think he's defensively good enough to be a fullback. You know, we can talk about Alexander-Arnold, but Alexander-Arnold does still have some good defensive attributes. I know Alexander-Arnold isn't the strongest 1v1, but Alexander-Arnold can still defend in moments. I think Dalot is just not going to be good enough in those moments. And I've been an advocate of Dalot to start and be given a chance, and I'm not sort of writing him off. I still think he's a very good footballer. But as a fullback, I just think you've got to be better defensively. I know the modern game's moved on, and I know that fullbacks are expected to produce more, but, you know, not for me. Dalot as our first. I think he's definitely our second choice. But yeah, definitely I agree with Wes. I'd like to see a bit more of Tellez, definitely tomorrow.
And that's unanimous then. Everyone wanting to see more of Tellez. I'm completely in agreement. Let us know what you think on Tellez starting tomorrow. But I think on that note, we'll wrap it up. It's very rare that all four of us agree on something. So, yeah, we'll end it on a positive. So a massive thank you to you three for joining me. It's been a very good episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. A massive thank you as well to everyone who's tuned in and got involved in the comments. You've really helped us with your opinions, and you created a good discussion. As I said, I hope you viewers enjoyed it as well. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you later.